Let's take a look at European motivations for exploration. European exploration and conquest was really fueled by a desire for new sources of wealth, increased power and status, and also a drive to convert others to Christianity. And to understand why Europe had these motivations, we really need to understand what was going on in Europe at this time, 1400s, 1500s, 1600s. One of the main reasons for exploration is commerce. And to understand why commerce was a driving motivator for exploration, we need to look at urbanization. That is, the movement of people from rural areas to cities, and those cities growing. People are moving to cities because that's where job opportunities are in the 14, 15, and 1600s. What this means is that the lords, the people that owned large tracts of land out in the countryside, are weaker now. As fewer and fewer people live on their land, they have less and less political power. The group that is growing in strength is the group that is commonly found in those growing cities, and that is the middle class, the educated, doctors, lawyers, and especially merchants, people who are engaged in commerce and business. And these merchants really need new sources of raw materials, and they also need markets for their finished goods. They need a place to get raw materials to make stuff, and then they need a place to sell stuff once they've made it. This is how capitalism starts to grow in Europe. Another reason for this increase in exploration at this time is improvements in technology. First off, let's clarify, people in Europe did not think the earth was flat. No sailor in Europe thought the earth was flat. Sure, there were probably some uneducated farmers who had never left their village who maybe thought the earth was flat, but every seaman who had been out on the open sea knew that the earth was curved. Improvements in existing technologies like compasses and new tools like that sextant that you see down there, which could be used to sight the stars and determine your latitude, in other words, how far north or south you were, as well as new and better ships like the caravel, which was a new ship that was better at tacking, in other words, zigzagging into the wind. So the caravel meant that it was easy to sail out and come back from places like Africa. So improvements in technology helped drive the exploration of this era as well. Another thing that's going on in Europe is the rise of the nation state. Here we see Louis XIV, who you learned about last year, as the prime example of that absolute monarch who's creating a nation state. Weak lords, strong central government. And Louis and other absolute monarchs are supported by the middle class, which means increased trade goes hand in hand with the success of absolute monarchs and their nation state. Nation states needed to explore. Nation states wanted to create colonies to bring glory to the name of that nation state and that ruler. We don't need to look any farther than the names of many of the colonies. The Spanish had the Philippines in the Pacific. The Philippines, named after King Philip. The French had Louisiana, named after King Louis. And the English had Virginia, named after their virgin queen, Queen Elizabeth. Also, these nation states are going to want defensive buffers from each other. Once they discover sources of wealth, they want to hold on to it. And as more and more nations start grabbing land in the Western Hemisphere, they need to amass their power to prevent others from taking it. Spain is especially doing a lot of this. They're worried about the French coming and taking over their territory from Louisiana. They're worried about English settlers in Canada and the modern United States. They're worried about Russian seal hunters coming down from the Pacific Northwest and taking some of their territory. This is why the fort and eventually town at St. Augustine is built. It's built in response to French outposts being built in the area. Another big factor in exploration is the dominant economic idea that exists in Europe at this time, and it's known as mercantilism. Mercantilism is kind of the economic principle that is popular in Europe in between feudalism and capitalism. Mercantilism is strongly supported by those rulers, by those absolute monarchs like Louis XIV. And it has a few basic principles that mercantilist supporters believed in. The first has to do with your balance of trade. It says that a nation should import as little as possible. In other words, a nation should produce as much stuff on their own and import from other countries as little as possible. The second part has to do with finished goods, and that says that you should export finished goods, not raw materials. Bring in raw materials, turn them into finished goods, and export those. The third part has to do with colonies, and colonies are essential to mercantilism. It says that a nation should acquire colonies so that they have cheap and easy access to natural resources. And then the colonies can be used as a market for finished goods. So get cheap or even free resources from your colonies, bring them back to the home country, turn them into finished goods, and then turn around and sell them back to the people in the colony. And the last principle of mercantilism has to do with gold and silver. It says that nations should amass as much gold and silver as possible, that nations should not let gold and silver leave the country. This is going to create a real problem for Spain's economy with major inflation as wealth from the New World starts rolling in. The last reason we'll talk about, the last motivation for exploration, is religion, in that many Europeans truly wanted to convert Native Americans to Christianity. They recognized that Native Americans did not have Christianity, that they recognized that Native Americans had not been exposed to Christianity, and as a result, they saw Native Americans as savages. They saw their religion as inferior. Many were genuinely concerned that Native American souls would go to hell because they had not been saved by Christianity. Now, some Indians are strongly attracted to this idea and really take to Christianity, while others merely paid it lip service because they understood that Europeans would be more willing to trade their valuable goods with Christian Indians rather than savage Indians. And this growth of religion leads to missions being established by the Spanish. And the Spanish mission system built these churches or missions often near concentrations of Native Americans. Think about those societies in the Southwest. We didn't really talk about the societies in California, but they're very similar to those ones in the Pacific Northwest. And there were often Spanish missions built nearby. These are used as kind of a pseudo-seat of government for the encomienda system, which is the system that's used to both convert Native Americans to Christianity and also to use the Native Americans as a workforce in the Spanish Empire. And in many cases, there's basically a theocracy in some of these Indian villages where the Spanish priests in that mission are really in charge of a lot of what is going on.